Your great strength is knowing who you are. Your great strength is knowing who you are. Individualities and how they shape our futures. The uniqueness. Your great strength is knowing who you are. That's not always easy. Your great strength is knowing who you are. Your great strength is knowing who you are. Sometimes it can be hard to do that. Oftentimes, it can be difficult for us to differentiate ourselves between our peers and others in society, especially with over 3 trillion individuals on this one earth. Finding ourselves as a complex being out of those 3 trillion can be rather difficult. However, when we first understand and learn to differentiate ourselves and our own abilities and innate talents and uniquenesses, we then can place ourselves in a functioning part of society where we truly belong. So when we understand this to be true, we have to go back to a quote by Oscar de la Renta, who stated that your great strength is knowing who you are. So to understand and analyze this quote, we're going to be looking in 2 key areas of analysis. First, by taking an overall arching generalization or an analysis of de la Renta's life and understanding how he was able to acknowledge this quote within his own sphere to better understand himself as an individual. And then we'll be moving on to our second point of analysis, by which we understand how we as complex creatures innately have a purpose and a desire to feel unique, yet part of something bigger and inclusion. So to begin with, looking at Oscar de la Renta, the famous and iconic fashion designer of the early 80s, we have to understand that by looking at him as an individual, utilizing his life as an understanding and a basis for how he transformed himself, coming from an lower middle class, somewhat marginalized man, he transformed himself in a matter of only a few years into being an iconic, marketable fashion icon. We can see this by first discovering how, number one, de la Renta, when he was a child, did not stand out from his siblings. However, after all, he was only one of 4. So having all of those siblings to try to compete with ultimately does bring some sort of rivalry, but at the same point, a sense of purpose. So when he was a younger man, he decided that he would take to the studios and try fashion as a way to differentiate and distinguish himself in his line of work. Now again, coming from an underprivileged middle-class family, this was not always easy for the young de la Renta. However, he discovered that he did have a passion for something that he could use, and this passion was different from what any of his siblings or his family members had and possessed. Therefore, by the time he was married, he started marketing his unique benefits and specialties in clothing to his wife's friends, therefore making himself a multi-millionaire by a very early age. Now, understanding how de la Renta was able to take his own special, unique strengths and gifts to his own benefit, we can move on to our second point of analysis, which is understanding how this actually impacts us as human beings in a complex, functioning society. Now, going back to my prior understanding of psychology, based off of my knowledge, there was a psychologist in the early 90s named Mr. York Pewter, who understood psychology and more so, specifically personality psychology, through the basis that every single functioning individual has a personality, and they also have a temperament. But the thing that differentiates temperament from personality is the fact that personalities are always changing, meaning that human beings innately do not stick with their behaviors and emotions and feelings and needs for the entirety of their lives. These can be shaped and changed based on their understanding of who they are as people and how they fit within their own sense of self. However, by the same logic, Mr. Porter also understood that because people have a sense to belong and need, oftentimes our personalities are shaped around our need to be loved, included, and seen as complex functioning individuals who are still part of a mass society working for a common or bigger goal than what we have ourselves. Therefore, when we understand this quote by Oscar de la Renta, that our greatest strength is knowing who we are, we don't have to individualize ourselves to almost put ourselves in a secluded box to be able to use our strengths for the best. Because again, based on the psychological analysis of how human beings inherently have an innate need to be loved and serve a bigger purpose, we see that regardless of what our functionality is, our greatest strengths are not only just to serve and please ourselves, but can be used in a functioning sense for the larger portion of society. Therefore, today, when we've understood De La Renta and his works of not only being an iconic fashion designer, but the greater underlying message of how he was able to utilize his gifts and abilities to help and serve society and leave a legacy on today's American media and pop art and culture, we see that through his quote, De La Renta taught us that even though our greatest strength is knowing who we are, in two key areas of analysis, we understood that by number one, analyzing De La Renta in his earlier family and his life, everybody has a gift, and it's just a matter of when we discover what this gift is. And number two, we understand that humans have an innate need to be a part of something, and that gift can shine through in a meaningful work for society. Thank you.